Welcome to our Kansas Jayhawks instant reaction post-game show with the Sports on 580 WIBW crew. I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. He is Fulton Caster. And the Kansas Jayhawks come up 2 points shy against the Arkansas Razorbacks in the 2022 AutoZone Liberty Bowl, 55-53 in triple overtime. This game, Fulton, quite literally, I think, had it all. A ton of points, 108 of them combined between the... No, that's actually... 108 of them combined between the two teams. We had triple overtime. We had a gigantic 32 unanswered point comeback for KU. They were down 38-13 in the second half, came all the way back to tie the game. But in the end, in the third overtime, KU comes up just short. They do not get a stop in the first round of 2-point shootout plays. Arkansas is able to score. And then on a trick play on KU's attempt to tie the game in overtime number 3, Jason Bean, yes, that Jason Bean, takes an end-around toss and in a split-second fight-or-flight decision decides to throw the ball to the end zone. It is over the head of every single player on the field, and that does it. KU falls to Arkansas 55-53. That is one of the most thrilling football games at any level for any amount of prestige I have ever seen in my entire life. We'll get to the decision, Fulton, at the end of the game in particular. We will get to some of the individual performances, which includes Jalen Daniels playing what is quite literally, statistically speaking, the best quarterback game in the history, over 100-year history of Kansas Jayhawks varsity football. But Fulton, after all that, what's your big takeaway from what you saw at KU tonight and the comeback effort that came up just 2 points short?
I think right there and how you said it is the thing that stands up most to me. It's the comeback. It's the story of what this team was the entire year. Was there were numerous times this entire season Kansas was down, 14 points, 20-some points. Games that in years past, KU would roll up, they would fold up like a cheap suit, and they would just tuck their tail between their legs, and they would go home and stop playing the rest of the game. And yet all year, this Kansas football team, no matter what the deficit was, they always kept fighting. They kept grinding. And that's the most important thing to me that I would pull away from this game is, yes, they ended up coming up 2 points short. And that is unfortunate. The way this game ended, I think, will sour a lot of the way a lot of Kansas fans remember this game. But I think what should be remembered most is that this team was down 38-13 in the second half. They were down 18 points in the fourth quarter. And they tied this game and sent it to overtime because they never stopped fighting. They never stopped believing. They kept playing hard. The defense was maligned the entire first half. Gave up 31 first half points to Arkansas. That was difficult. That couldn't stop anything. That looked outmatched, looked outmuscled. They gave up 7 points in the entire second half before the overtime period began. Had found a way to keep things in it before the offense finally found the way to get back on track. The fight of this Kansas team is the most important thing I think anyone can pull away from it, because years passed, and no one would have blamed KU in this game being on 38-13 in the third quarter if they just mailed it in. No one would have blamed them. It's a bowl game. It doesn't matter. It's supposed to not matter. It's supposed to be a game that's just kind of, it's on your schedule. It's there. No one would have blamed them for mailing it in, but Kansas refused to do that. They kept fighting, they kept scrapping, they kept clawing, and they pulled off one of the greatest comebacks I've personally ever seen.
It's, it was an incredible game that ended in a brutal way, but I think to your point, and not to sound overly Pollyanna about it, because, let's be real, KU in the second half was down 38-13. This wasn't like it was for a full 60-plus minutes, the greatest game ever played by Kansas football. But you're right. There was fight. I said this at the end of 580 Sports Talk on Wednesday, right at 6 o'clock. So the game wasn't quite to the end of the second quarter. I said it during the second half to my wife watching at home. I said, look, I want KU to come back and be in this game. I want them to make it a 1 or a 2 score game, have a respectable end to the contest. I would be content with that. It's been a great year. KU's probably ahead of schedule. Some people said bowl game this year. I thought it was going to be 4 wins. That was the number I was hoping for this year. So KU maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, be in this game, show some fight, give Arkansas a reason to keep playing the entire way. That would have been enough for me. And they just kept coming, and they kept, they took advantage of some dumb mistakes by Arkansas. The fumble at the end of the game, which they just kind of hand waved. And they're like, oh, yeah, fumble, whatever. Well, KU was able to turn that into points. The onside kick, which, again, an Arkansas mistake. I have no idea what Matt Landers was doing.
I have zero idea. He watched a ball bounce in front of him for at least a full second before pouncing, before even attempting to move with a bunch of blue jerseys coming at him.
So you had Arkansas mistakes. Now some bizarre, truly bizarre decisions coaching-wise by Arkansas, but KU took advantage of them, and KU did make the smart plays, and KU made the right plays. And look, KJ Jefferson was awesome for Arkansas, and we've got his stats rolling on the bottom of the screen. He was 19 of 29 passing, just under 300 yards, had the 2 rushing touchdowns, 130 on the ground. He was tremendous. Jalen Daniels, like I said at the top, and this is statistically backed, the best quarterback game in the history of Kansas football, and he was unbelievable. And I know he started slow, and he had the 2 interceptions on his first 14 attempts of the game after having 2 all year going into the Liberty Bowl. But he was absolutely sensational. 37 of 55, 544 yards, 5 touchdowns, did have the 2 early picks. I mean, he was unbelievable. He had the rushing touchdown late in the game as well. And it was the fact that he was the superstar. I mean, that is headline number 1 of the comeback, of the story of this game, and really into the, very questionable decision at the end of the game, which we'll touch on here in just a hot second. He was the catalyst for all of it, and he was a superstar. But you also had a bunch of other guys who stepped up and made plays. You had the first 3 touchdowns of the game for KU, all Kansas guys who made it happen. 2 for Kai Thomas, 1 for Mason Fairchild. And for a guy like Kai, who obviously means a lot to the Sports on 580 crew, we called his entire high school career Topeka High, football, basketball, all that. No, he's a great kid, comes from Topeka. That obviously means a lot. To see him ball out in the bowl game, have his best game of the year in the bowl game, that means something. After last year, he was the bowl MVP for Minnesota in their bowl game. He obviously loves the bright lights, and he was great. That was awesome to see. Luke Grimm, who I've been pounding on the table for. You have heard this. Anyone who has seen my Sports on 580 tweets during KU games has seen anyone. I have been pounding the table saying Luke Grimm is that guy. He is that dude all season. Comes out 10 catches, 167 yards, and a touchdown in this game. He was absolutely sensational. Jared Casey, another guy who was just incredible. In the stat sheet, he only ends up with 2 catches for 6 yards, I believe it is, but he came up with a couple 2-point conversions. He was huge at the very end of the game, doing what Jared Casey does. Caught the touchdown at the end as well. I mean, he was special the way he has been special for now the last 2 seasons for KU. And defensively too, look, the defense stepped up at the end of the game. Arkansas did not score for a long time. The big part of scoring 25 straight points to tie the game at 38 is not allowing the other team to score. And for as maligned as the defense was early in the game, you've got to give credit to Brian Borland's unit in the second half, despite losing a ton of dudes. Lonnie Phelps got hurt at the very end of the game. Kobe Bryant got hurt after the fumble return. All these dudes are getting banged up. They're dropping like flies. Craig Young from the defensive side, he's yelling on the sideline, trying to fire guys up. Love Craig Young as a player and a personality. Everybody stepped up, and it came down to the very end, and that's all you could have hoped for, especially given the way the game started and the way the scoreboard looked in the second half. It was an amazing fight for KU, a lot of sensational individual performances, but we've been beating around the bush long enough. We've got to get to the play call at the end of the game. 2-point shootout. Arkansas scores on its play. KU comes out 3-yard line. They're moving left to right across your TV screen. It's an end-around double quarterback play that ends up in Jason Bean, the backup, in what potentially could be his final game of his college career, because it has been reported from some sources more reputable than others that he is potentially going to hang it up after this. And he will always go down as a KU legend for what he did to keep KU at least somewhat afloat after Jalen Daniels got hurt this season. Comes end around, has a split-second decision, either race to the corner, would have been a tough play, but maybe it's doable, or throw the ball. He throws it to the moon. It's incomplete. Look, you can debate, Fulton, whether it was the right decision by Bean to run it and dive and risk it all to run to the end zone. I mean, he is the fastest player KU has at any position, or to throw it in that situation, or did he throw to the right guy? Here's what it comes down to for me. He never should have been in that position. There is no reason why your backup quarterback should be in a position on a do-or-die play in a postseason game. You can say bowls are, it's the Liberty Bowl, it's an exhibition, whatever. This game clearly meant something to these guys. Look at the way Kenny Logan reacted at the end of the game. This meant something to those guys. Craig Young, just mentioned him, the way he was trying to fire up the offense after the defense made some stops. This meant something. And your starting quarterback has played at an all-world, all-universe level the entire second half, the whole comeback, and you take the ball out of his hands on that play. It's irredeemable to me, Fulton. And I know we're talking right now as press conferences are going on and we're getting some media reaction, but I can't believe it. I can't reconcile it with any sort of logic. Dance with the one you brought. Jalen Daniels brought you all the way to that point. If you're going to lose, let it be with his legs or with his arm, with his hand. You cannot take the ball out of his hands in that situation. And frankly, Fulton, I don't think there's any way you can redeem that play call. No logic is going to make me feel better about that.
So there is a belief I have grown to have over the years as football has evolved at the college football level and the NFL level. There is such a thing as being there's an Achilles heel to ultra creative play callers, and it's that they get too creative. We make the joke at the NFL level with the Chiefs that Andy Reid gets too cute on certain plays, and you just need to simplify the offense. Andy Kotelnicki got too cute to end the game. I don't understand. I don't agree with the logic at all. I completely don't agree with taking the ball at Jalen Daniels' hands. His thought process must have been in the vein of, no one's going to expect Jason Bean to make the throw. We've done these end arounds before. We get everyone flowing one way and no one's flowing the back way. It'll be an easy throw for Jason Bean. The problem is that it's what we saw and it's what you noted is when it becomes a more complex play, which it did because Arkansas didn't bite on the end around. They very much stayed home. It becomes a very difficult play that requires some immense creativity and split-second decision-making, whether to throw that ball or make a race for the pylon that, did he have it, did he not? Who knows at this point? I'm with you. You can't put your backup quarterback in that position to make that split-second decision, particularly, and this is to me the key above it all. Jalen Daniels, as you have noted, and it's very correct, had the greatest quarterback game in the history of Kansas varsity football. In the entire history, no quarterback, no great one you could name me, had a better quarterback game than Jalen Daniels had on this night. You have to let that guy make the play. When you have a superstar at the most important position on the field, which is quarterback, you need to do or die by that player on your most important plays. That is something we have seen and we've talked about, and everyone talks about at all levels of football, that when you have that guy at that spot, they're the ones who get to make the decision. I understand trying to get creative. I understand trying to get Arkansas napping because that's what KU has done all year. They have made a living out of being more intelligent and more creative than opposing defensive coordinators. That is what they have done all year and have made a lot of hay with that ability. But this was not the time to do it. You'd sit there, you spread out 5 guys, you tell Jalen Daniels what the routes are, and if anyone's covered, you say, JD, go make a play. That's what you do in the most important play calls of the game. You don't get too cute, and you don't get too creative. For all of the greatness Andy Kotelnicki is as an offensive coordinator and how it's great that he has his new extension, and he's going to be at Kansas for a while because he does a lot of great things. He has the fatal flaw that all creative play callers have, and they can get way too cute and way too complex in the biggest moments because they just try to outthink the other opposing coordinator, whereas sometimes it is as simple as just, you have possibly the best player on the football field. Let him go be great.
I want to bring up something that I think is a fair point and a fair take to have on this situation. It's from our good friend Jesse Newell of the Kansas City Star, who covered KU, obviously, for a long time, friend of the program on both shows on Sports on 580, and covered KU for a long time. He's on the Chiefs beat now at the Kansas City Star, but he just tweeted this moments ago, and I want to get to it. He says, this is where I sympathize with play callers. KU is on its 5th or 6th 2-point conversion of the night. KU went to a play it's run before and executed decently well, except for the throw. Looked like the run was there. No one feels worse than Bean. Just unfortunate all the way around. And I don't want to go too hard on this because I respect Jesse's opinion as much as I respect anybody's, and obviously he's not here to defend it either. And that's like, I have no ill will about this toward Jason Bean. I'm sure some weirdo out there is going to say terrible things to him. Look, it's a split-second decision. He's coming in cold. He hasn't done a whole lot all night. I don't feel bad, or I feel bad for Jason Bean. I know he is heartbroken over it. I am certain of it. And again, he has meant so much to this team, so much to this fan base over the course of the year, to the point where, Fulton, if you were on Twitter in the early part of the game, I'm certain that you saw tons of people claiming Daniels doesn't have it, Bean is the better quarterback, even though that is objectively not true. There were calls for that in the first half of this game. I feel awful for him. And I do not blame him for what happened because, again, my stance is he never should have been put in that position. You want to, nip it in the butt. You want to avoid cut it off at the top of the chain so it doesn't get all the way to the bottom where various things can unfold and you run into all those variables. That's how I view this kind of situation. And I understand that in the past, this play has worked. I get that. But in that moment, it just seems like it seems like a bad call in that moment. I guess I'll just be blunt about it. And yeah, has it worked before? Sure. Have they gone to multiple other 3-yard, 2-yard goal line plays throughout the course of the game? Yes, KU has. You can run the same play multiple times. Just execute it. KU did not get back into this game by just completely outsmarting and out-physicaling Arkansas. Because guess what? When they tried to out-physical Arkansas, they didn't do squat the entire game because Arkansas was bigger, faster, and stronger, and that was incredibly obvious. KU in this contest, Fulton, and this includes 21 yards on 14 carries for Jalon Daniels and sacks factor into rushing yards for quarterbacks, 34 carries, 59 yards as a team. That's 1.7 yards per carry for KU in this game. Okay, that's not, we're not talking about the run game in particular, but that is to illustrate that you're winning by execution. You're not winning by anything else. You're not winning by out physicaling them, necessarily even outsmarting them, maybe in some cases, but it comes down to execution. And KU got behind early because of some poor execution from the quarterback. The one interception for sure was a very bad ball by Jalon Daniels. You had the fumble on the kickoff, bad execution that cost KU dearly early in the game and put them in that gigantic hole. I just think that is way too complicated of a play for that situation. You get to overtime 7 or something, sure. You've run out of everything. You got to circle back through. I just feel like in that situation, how do you take it out of Daniels' hands? Because you can say, hey, they've executed something like that well before, but you've never had a performance like this from your starting quarterback before. Never. Not this season, not earlier in Daniels' career, not any time in KU history. He was on fire like we have never seen from a Jayhawks quarterback before. And it's just tough that that's the way the game ends. It is miraculous that KU got to that point. But man, it is tough to know that is the way that it came to a close on that decision, that play call, and unfortunately the tough play by Jason Bean. We've talked so much about Jalon Daniels. We could spend another, we've gone 17 minutes into the show now, Fulton. We could easily spend another 17 plus talking all about what Jalon Daniels did, the tremendous throws, avoiding pressure. Great job of the offensive line. They deserve some shouts out as well because they held up late in the game. It was, I think, the second to last play in the second overtime when they held up. It was right after the holding penalty where they were able to bow up. Bryce Cabledew did a tremendous job protecting the strong side for Jalon Daniels. I thought the line played really well for the most part late in the game, negating some of that physicality from Arkansas. Were there any other performances? And I ran through a few of them earlier on. Kai Thomas, Luke Grimm, Jared Casey, to name a few. Among that group or anyone else on either side of the ball, did someone really stand out to you in this game?
To me, and I know we've already mentioned him, but I feel like he just needs to get the proper flowers for how well he played. The emergence of Luke Grimm for being such a reliable and consistent target. I know we've touched him. He had such great 10 catches, 167 yards, touchdown. But it goes beyond this game. I think this game is a culmination of what he's done because it isn't like Luke Grimm is just, his longest play on the day was a great 45-yard, kind of catch and run and big play down the field. But then you watch some of his other plays, and yes, he'll make catches and runs, and he'll be open down the field. But also, he just always seems to be open at just the right time and is always right there to make a play. And more importantly, consistent, reliable catching in hands on a night when you needed it, on a night where part of a comeback is execution issues. The execution is so important. Luke Grimm is that guy in the receiving core that Jalon Daniels knows if he can find him and him just be open, he's going to catch the football. He's going to try and make a play and do something special. It felt like just as much as Jalon Daniels was at the center of every big play Kansas made tonight to get back into this game and tie it up and make the big comeback, it felt like Luke Grimm was right there with him, always being his big pass-catching option to make a play. And what's always more impressive to me with Grimm, we look at these wide receivers. We talk about them in the prototypical size. They're usually these bigger guys. They're big. They're long. Some of them are fast. Some of them are physical. Luke Grimm, you look at him, does not look like a star wide receiver. He doesn't have that prototypical star height. He doesn't have a prototypical star build. He just looks like a guy on a team. And yet he was the best wide receiver for KU on the field because he just executes at the right, proper level and does all those little things right. I know you have talked about Luke Grimm at length and have, championed him all season, rightfully so. I've joined right on there with you here as of late with how well he's played. And he just, I think, capped off his season showing that he might not look the part, but he is a fantastic Big 12 Power 5 caliber wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, Grimm has been a standout guy for me really since his career at KU started, but I think the entire wide receiver crew deserves to get some kind of credit here. Lawrence Arnold, who I don't know if we've mentioned by name yet during this postgame show, Fulton, had 119 receiving yards in the game, and quiet as it's been kept, he's had a really good year. And you just have so many guys. You know, Quentin Skinner got banged up. Obviously, he took that jacked up hit in the first half, but this receiver group has played really well all year. And I think going into the season, it was considered on the outside and on the inside to be something of a weakness for this team. But you had guys all over the field making plays today. Obviously, Luke Grimm had a huge day. Obviously, Lawrence Arnold had a huge day. You had running backs who were factoring into the passing game. You had tight ends who were factoring into the passing game. Mason Fairchild had another good game. He had such a good year. Again, quiet, maybe not the gaudiest numbers, but just a really effective piece. But you go up and down that list of wide receivers, man. Grimm and Arnold and Skinner had a really good year. Maybe didn't do quite as much today, but has obviously been an effective piece. One of the last drives of the game, you know who caught the final 2 balls to get into the end zone? It was Kevin Terry and Doug Emillion. These guys were no-shows for most of the year, and not necessarily because they weren't playing well. They just didn't see the field all that much. Our guy Michael Swain from Fog.net has talked all year about how, hey, I think Doug Emillion can be a really good player for this team. I think he can be a real factor for this offense. He just needs to get some opportunities, needs to work on some things so he can get on the field. Boom, gets on the field, scores a touchdown in a crucial moment late in a bowl game. That is a big moment. That's a big play by an unsung hero. Tanaka Scott had a big catch down near the end zone in the red zone at one point. That became a strength really fairly early in the season. And I think everyone kind of points to the TCU game where Bean came in and Grimm and Skinner and these dudes were making insane catch after insane catch. Quentin Johnson was on the other side for the Horned Frogs having a great game. And that was one of the best played wide receiver games of the entire year by any program, any conference, anywhere. All year long, though, those guys continue to step up. They made plays, and I think that is what stood out to me about this game, too. As good as Daniels was, he got plenty of help, and I think the skill players around him really stepped up. And shout out to Grimm, shout out to Arnold, but shout out to that entire room. Shout out to the offensive coaching staff as well. I know it's not just Andy Kotelnicki, it's the position coaches as well for helping that group develop, really mesh with this offense. Grimm is a Sunday guy, by the way. I know I've said that about a handful of players for KU and certainly for K-State in our post-game recaps over the course of the year. I think Grimm might be a Sunday guy. He's got that shiftiness. He's got great hands. I'll keep that one tucked away because I think he's going to be at KU for at least another year, but I think he might be developing into that kind of player. All right, Fulton, let's wrap this thing up here. A final thought on this game, the 55-53 triple OT loss for KU to Arkansas. Both a look back on this game and maybe a note for the future really quickly here before we get out, just about what this tells you about where this program is heading and something that excites you, something that concerns you about the immediate future for this program.
Obviously, the standard at KU, I think, has been raised just a little bit. They're here earlier than expected. That this is shown to be a team that, with so much of these guys coming back next year, that they have a lot of fight, that this is no longer the doormat, laughingstock, joke of college football, Kansas football team. This is a team that's going to have fight, that's going to have grit, that's going to compete. We know what Lance Leipold and company can do to try and fill goals in the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail. All I know is going forward, I feel great about what the future of Kansas football is. I don't know if they'll go to a bowl game next season, but all I know now is I won't be surprised if they're back in a bowl game next season because so much of these guys are back, and these guys seem to really have bought in and understand that Kansas football can be a place to win if they just compete and execute and get the right guys in the door.
I think that point about so many guys coming back is extremely crucial. I saw some people trying to do the math on Twitter at the end of the game, or maybe it was even at the end of the game, about how many guys can come back for this team. It, in theory, and granted, not everybody is probably going to come back because there are things like the transfer portal. There are, some guys might think about a professional future, whatever it might end up being, but you can return almost the entire starting lineup, if not almost the entirety of the offensive two deep for this KU team come next year. And defensively too, a lot of guys are returning. Not everyone's going to be back. Marvin Grant was a one-year guy, I believe. Lorenzo McCaskill, I know for a fact, was a one-year guy. You're going to have so many pieces come back to get this experience, what it's like to have those extra weeks of bowl practice, what it is like to make the trip, to travel for a bowl game and all the pageantry that comes along with it, other media obligations, things you see and do, things like that. That is invaluable experience that very few guys for this team had ever experienced before. Rich Miller at Buffalo, when he was there under Lance Leipold, he had that experience. You throw in Craig Young, who was riding the bench at Ohio State, guys, or mostly was riding the bench at Ohio State, guys like that. Maybe they have that experience. Mike Nowitzki's another one who came over from Buffalo too. Trevor Wilson, who unfortunately didn't get to play in the game because of an injury to his left hand, left wrist, left arm, somewhere over there. He had a cast on. But having that experience is really valuable. And I think too, this is from Jalen Daniels, as transcribed by Rob Collins from Fox 4 in Kansas City, who said that, hey, this loss stings right now. Feel like we're going to hit the ground running when we get back, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. I think all that's true. I think Jalen Daniels is the right quarterback to lead this program. I definitely think that Lance Leipold is the right coach to be leading this program, even if some things he does, punting on the plus side of the field in the third quarter, things like that, maybe drive me up a wall. But generally speaking, I think the right pieces are in place for KU to keep taking another step forward and more steps forward, which is encouraging. This loss hurts. It stings. As a KU fan, as a KU alumnus, this is one that, again, I said it at the top, I just wanted KU to be competitive after the way this game started and after KU went down 25 points in the second half. I would have been thrilled if you told me, hey, KU lost by one possession. I would say, hey, man, that sounds great. They fought hard. They came back. Great for the team. I'm proud of them. To get to a game like that, an all-time great game, that might go down as the best Liberty Bowl to ever be played. It's the 7th oldest bowl game. Maybe it goes down as the greatest one to ever be played. It is for sure the highest scoring, one of the best offensive games in KU history. I would assume Arkansas history as well. It stings. It's hard, but I think you have to be, if you're a KU fan, proud of the performance, proud of the team. And if you're a neutral fan, you probably think, wow, I'm impressed. I can't believe they came back. Leipold's doing the right thing. Those players really are studs. And if you are a hater, well, then maybe you're saying, hi, I told you so. That's certainly possible as well. But it was a fun game, not so much of a fun outcome. But again, a lot of praise, a lot of shouts out deserved for Jalen Daniels, that entire offense, Lance Leipold, and KU. But however, despite all that, KU does come up short against Arkansas, 55-53 in 3 overtimes. We even got the stupid 2-point shootout to cap off the Liberty Bowl. We really did have everything. We'll be talking all about this game coming up on Thursday's editions of Mic'd Up and 580 Sports Talk. You can join Fulton and Jake Laban for Mic'd Up from noon until 3, and then join myself and Dan Lucero for 580 Sports Talk from 3 until 6 p.m. Central Time on the Sports Voice of Kansas, 580 WIBW. Again, your final score from our Kansas Jayhawks instant reaction post-game show. KU falls to Arkansas in 3 overtimes, 55-53 at the 2022 Liberty Bowl. For Fulton, I'm Brendan. We'll talk to you guys coming up Thursday on the Sports Voice of Kansas. Until then, make sure you're following our YouTube. You follow us on Twitter, Sports on 580 in both places. We'll talk to you guys coming up on the Sports Voice of Kansas